Good evening and welcome to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority meeting of February 18th, 2025. My name is Phil Ercolini. I'm chair of the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, and I call this meeting to order at 5:35 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this public meeting of the SRA is being conducted via remote participation. This session will be recorded and will be a public record. I'll now ask that board members confirm they are in attendance, and I'll do so in alphabetical order. Awana Bonnie.
Here.
Courtney Bronson.
Here.
Ben Ewan Campen is not with us this evening. William Gage.
Here.
Patrick McCormick.
Here.
Justine Stone.
Here.
Myself, Phil Ercolini, are in attendance, and we do have a quorum, so I'll now ask city staff to present a few of the house rules about using the technology. Ben?
Yes. So through you, Mr. Chair, hi, everyone. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development with the city. I also serve as staff to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, or the SRA. I'll just note that when an agenda item is being presented this evening, any presentation materials that staff have received ahead of time will be displayed on the screen. And if participants wish to direct the board's attention to any specific page, they should verbally note which page staff should show on the screen and should then verbally explain to the board what is being shown. Please also note that this meeting is being conducted remotely using Zoom webinar. In order to comply with open meeting law, which doesn't allow for what is called side conversation, the chat function amongst attendees has been disabled. If you as an attendee have a question or would like to make a comment on the matters discussed tonight, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to speak. And I will then unmute participants one by one and give you 2 minutes to speak. When it is your turn, please clearly state your name and address before saying anything else. And after 2 minutes, your microphone will then be muted. Please also remember that any questions asked by attendees this evening will be part of the open record. And I'll now pass things to the SRA's Special Counsel, Catherine Lester-Selkert.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine Lester-Selkert. I just want to take a moment to remind all board members that any votes taken must be roll call votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine and Ben. And so we'll head right to the agenda. And the first item is approval of the minutes of the January 11th general meeting. Did all members have an opportunity to review the minutes? Any amendments, any changes, errata, anything like that? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Make a motion.
Awana Bonnie makes a motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Bill Gates seconds. Let's do a roll call vote. Awana Bonnie,
Yes.
Courtney Brunson,
Yes.
Ben Ewan Campen is not with us this evening. William Gage,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Yes.
Christine Stone,
Yes.
and myself, Phil Ercolini, voted to approve the minutes of January 11th as presented. Second item on the agenda is a public comment period. And Ben, are there any members of the public who want to address the members at this point?
For you, Mr. Chair, we have 5 members of the public in attendance if we want to just give 15 seconds.
Yep.
And just to note again, if any members of the public do want to speak, please use the raise your hand function. I'll allow you to speak. All right, Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands.
All right, thank you, Ben. So the next item on the agenda, item number 3, is 90 Washington Street, the demonstration project plan and general planning and communication update from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will present on that tonight.
Okay.
Ted Fields, Senior Economic Development Planner with the Economic Development Division. I'm going to share my screen. All right, Ben will let me share my screen.
You should be able to now, Ted.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chair, it's my pleasure to brief the authority on an update to the disposition process for 90 Washington Street tonight.
Just quickly, we can't see the slides yet. Just want to confirm.
You can't see the slides.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, can you see this window now?
No.
It says you started,
Yeah.
yeah, so now we can.
Now you can.
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you for your patience, Mr. Chair, with technology. Again, I'm going to update the authority on the disposition process for 90 Washington Street, given recent changes in the project status. As you are all aware, the redevelopment authority took Washington Street in 2019 to transfer to the city for construction of a new public safety building and to dispose of the remainder to private development partners to build complementary residential, commercial, and civic development. HRNA Advisors was hired to guide the SRA in finding private development partners, and they pursued that path by issuing a request for qualifications in 2023 and developing a request for proposals starting in 2024. And as you are very well aware, the recent Superior Court judgment now requires the redevelopment authority to pay an additional $30 million plus for 90 Washington Street, plus accrued interest back to the city. This new fiscal reality makes building a public safety building on 90 Washington Street financially unfeasible for the city to pursue. So the project has had to be reimagined, and the goal has had to be changed to recoup losses or costs, I'm sorry, related to paying the city back for that judgment. Any other public benefits that were originally contemplated, such as building a station for Fire Engine 3, will need to be weighed carefully against the goal of recouping as much value as possible from disposing of 90 Washington Street. Staff are working with HRNA Advisors to adjust this process with a focus on recouping as much funds as possible to pay off the bonds and associated interest that was used to pay for the site. And in the coming months, staff will provide regular updates on the updated disposition process and any decision points that are related to that. The Redevelopment Authority and 90 Washington Street Civic Advisory Committee will continue to have critical supervisory roles over 90 Washington Street's disposition. So in this new disposition model that we're pursuing, the Redevelopment Authority will have the ultimate decision-making responsibility regarding the disposition of 90 Washington Street. The Redevelopment Authority will review and accept the outputs of the disposition process for 90 Washington Street, including the final RFP or disposition instrument that is proposed by HRNA, all purchase proposals, and execution of the final disposition to one or more purchasers. And again, we want to reiterate that staff will regularly update the Redevelopment Authority on the work of our advisors, especially HRNA and other real estate consultants used to dispose of 90 Washington Street during this new process, as well as the deliberations and the advice of the 90 Washington Street Civic Advisory Committee. So that, in a very short nutshell, is the update on how we are reconfiguring the disposition process for 90 Washington Street. Moving away from the RFP process we were working on for the past year and reconfiguring it to allow for the disposition of the site for the maximum possible value back to the SRA and eventually the city. So I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Any questions, members of Ted while we're here?
I want to make a quick note just to reiterate what Ted has mentioned. I know a lot of this isn't new information necessarily for SRA members. We really just kind of wanted to take this moment to stress a lot of the touch points for the redevelopment authority moving forward in this process are the same that they have been. Our focus over the last month especially has been really on kind of coalescing around a clear communication strategy and message from the city about this shift in priorities at the site, which was summarized in that memo that staff shared with the redevelopment authority along with the Somerville City Council, and which was also summarized in a press release that was released several weeks ago. So not a lot of new information, just to reiterate sort of what the touch points in the process will be. As Ted mentioned, our focus right now is really getting the correct scope for any increased work that we're going to do with the real estate consultant that is guiding us through this disposition process. And so we will keep the authority apprised as we have any updates with that process, or as they have any questions that they want to pose or get clarity on as they're shaping that strategy.
Yeah. And I also want to stress that we're also within this new disposition process. We are looking at how we communicate regularly, not just with the redevelopment authority and among city staff, but also the public, especially the abutters and the neighborhood around 90 Washington Street. And in fact, we're actually drafting or are sending out a letter to Cobble Hill Apartments, kind of reiterating what was said in the press release recently, so that they are fully aware of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions or comments? I just have one, I guess, relative to time frame. Is this basically in keeping what staff thought? Because we're into the middle of February, and when is the first payment due, and how is that? As it relates to marketing and whatnot? How are we doing with time? Is this fitting into the plan?
We're doing our best to fit this new process into the revised timeline for paying back the bonds and the accrued interest. For details of the timing, I'm going to refer you to Ben, but we are aware of that timeline, and we're making sure that this new process will work within that new time frame.
Yeah, so Kathy, please correct me if I'm wrong. The payment is intended to be made imminently. I'm not sure the exact timing, but imminently. But we still feel on track with the 2-year schedule that we have planned to manage this disposition.
That's right. Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure which payment you were talking about in terms of what your question. If you're talking about paying the judgment, that's going to be paid in full this month.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. But the interest on the debt, on the bonds, is that something that is?
And there will be interest on the bond. There's a 2-year bond, short-term, for the short-term borrowing. My understanding is it's 500,000 each year
Okay,
of the bond,
okay,
if I have that straight. I could be wrong in the exact amount, but we don't have to pay principal,
right,
just interest only for the 2 years during the time that the bond is, before it's, during the bond term, I should say.
right. And now, so I don't want to, and this is, I don't want to go down a path that I'm probably not as well versed in as I should be, but as it relates to the bond market, and Christine probably a better person to speak to that. Is there the opportunities during the course of the issuance of the bond or the 2-year period that you can renegotiate, or if the interest rates go down?
I don't think so. So
Okay.
what
this is my understanding, and I am not a municipal finance expert, but once you issue a bond, it has a coupon rate for the duration of the bond. So I don't know what that is, but let's just say it's 4%. And it was issued at a time when the market rate was 4%. If interest rates go up, then the folks that are trading the bond would realize a loss, right? Because the bond's only paying 4%, but if they went out and bought another bond, they get 5%. So it's not really the city. I think the city's obligations are fixed with respect to the duration of the bond term.
Okay,
That
okay.
would be my understanding too, and we can certainly confirm that with the, with Ed Bean.
Okay.
Now, if there's, then you get into things like prepayment and a bunch of probably very technical aspects of municipal financing that I don't think anybody here wants to comment on, but my sense is that's not what the city, I mean, the city sort of goes into this like, all right, we have this obligation, it's a 2-year duration, and that's the schedule we have to work with.
Yeah. The reason it came up because there was some, I don't know where I read it, but the city did get a very, very high AAA.
Oh,
bond.
AAA rating. So whether or not this bond went out, so that has to do with the 4%, right? Like if the market for AAA bonds was 4%, they took advantage of that. But whereas if we were a single A rating, if the city had a single A rating, then presumably the interest rate would be higher than 4% because there's more risk there. You're a riskier bet, the city. But again, I don't know I don't know 4% is an example. I don't know
Yeah.
what these bonds went out,
Exactly,
what
right.
rate they went out at. But
Yeah.
certainly a higher bond rating means that borrower, and in this case it's the city, should be borrowing at a lower rate than if they had a lower bond rating.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Cambridge, I believe, has a AAA rating. So I would think that Somerville is, pleased to be in the same league as Cambridge, because that's I think AAA is the highest you can be.
All right. Well, thanks, Christine. I'm sorry my own curiosity anyway. Any other questions? I'm sorry. go ahead.
I'm going to let Courtney go first. We both have our hands raised, but go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, and it might be related. Well, I know in fact it's related to a point that Christine brought earlier. So let me know if you have any additional thoughts. I recall us mentioning part of what would be really important for the timeliness of this sale, as well as a maximized return, concerns about zoning changes. And that may not be included in this plan. That may be outside of the purview of what you just discussed, Ted. But I just wanted to re-elevate that since I knew that was something we discussed.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Christine, did you want to follow up on something else? Or?
Well, it would be very helpful, Ted, if in your, my sense is either you or Ben or someone else on your staff will be updating us regularly.
Yeah.
With a presentation deck similar to what you just prepared and shared with us. So thank you for that. I think what would be incredibly helpful to all of us here on the board is to put that timeline, to have a timeline, because it will be a question that we raise often. And
Sure.
so to have that sort of history of that and to have it in front of us, I think will be helpful, because as time goes by, we forget when the 2-year window started.
Sure.
So I would kindly ask going forward, you sort of put that timeline out there, because, and to Courtney's point, I believe the zoning for this site right now is civic, and under the civic zoning, very few commercial developments are allowed as of right.
Mhm.
So whoever is the buyer of this property will either be enjoying new zoning for some new development, or will likely want to take the property through some sort of a zoning change before they acquire the property, all of which takes time.
Correct.
And so we think we have a lot of time here with 2 years. We really don't.
Understood.
Thank you, Christine, for that. Well said. Any
I-
other questions or comments relative to that presentation? Okay,
Just,
I'm sorry,
Oh.
go ahead, Ben.
well, sorry, Kathy just raised her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I-
Kathy.
I think Ben and I have the same point in mind. I just wanted to make sure the chair and members are aware that Dana Whiteside has joined the meeting. And if you guys haven't met him, he is the Deputy Director of Economic Development.
Welcome.
Welcome to him
Welcome.
for joining
welcome
us this
aboard,
evening.
Dana. Okay, nice to see you,
Um,
Ben.
Sorry, I just want to speak to a couple of items. So first off, thank you, Courtney, Christine, definitely hear both of those points. Christine, we can definitely return with kind of a more comprehensive timeline. Part of the conversation that we're looking to have with HRNA once their scope is expanded on this is just getting a very clear sense of how much time we should anticipate for each step in the process so that we can have more clarity in backtracking that timeline. Because we've been working, we obviously have kind of our rough estimates at this moment, but trying to have a clearer sense when we actually put a timeline in front of people of these are the milestones and this is when we are hoping to hit them. So definitely heard on that. And then similar on zoning, this is a conversation that we've been having. So trying to, obviously the considerations with zoning, trying to have maximum clarity within this process for both a potential development team, but also the neighborhood. And so this is something that we are also talking about, exploring a few different options, but once one is clear, we'll come back and discuss this with the authority.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thanks for that. Any other questions or comments before we go on to the next item? All right, thank you, Ted, for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The next item on the agenda, item number 4 is the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan and an update regarding the acquisition of civic space, I guess, at 299 Broadway.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, please give me 1 second to pull up presentation. I'm actually going to leave the presentation off screen for a second. It's just more kind of helpful site plan visuals, but I'll give some quick context first.
Okay.
Even with 3 screens, it's funny to try to make everything fit. Okay, so wanted to give SRA members a few updates about how development is progressing at 299 Broadway. So I'm going to do some quick level setting similar to what Ted did, just for anyone who's tuning in who might not have as much context on this project. So one of the active urban renewal plans that the Redevelopment Authority manages is the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan. And this covers a large portion of what's known as the Temple Hill block of Winter Hill, which is mostly made up of the vacant Star Market site at 299 Broadway, and then several adjacent lots and buildings. Several years ago, there was a development partnership that put forward a proposal to develop the Star Market site and several of the parcels making up the majority of that urban renewal plan into mixed-use housing, retail, and community space with several outdoor civic spaces. So the current proposal for that site that's been permitted by the Zoning Board of Appeals, or the ZBA, comprises 319 residential units, 136 of which are income restricted or what are commonly referred to as affordable units, along with approximately 10,000 square feet of retail space and 3,000 square feet of community space. This project, as we've discussed in previous SRA meetings, has been heavily supported by the neighborhood and the city. So beyond creating the urban renewal plan, the city has also created an urban center housing tax increment financing scheme on this site, or UCTIF, which provides tax relief for a period of time after the project is leased. And the portion that I wanted to update about tonight is, as I believe staff has discussed in previous meetings, we also received a $2.5 million MassWorks infrastructure program grant from the Commonwealth's Executive Office of Economic Development to support the development of the civic spaces specifically on the site. So I'm just going to share screen quickly. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes.
All right. So this is just giving a general overview of the site plan that was initially approved by the ZBA. So you can see there are two buildings that make up the overall project. Building A here, the western building, this is 115 units, all income restricted. And then the eastern building, building B, this is, I believe, 183, something around that number, 184, 21 of which are income restricted. And then there are several civic spaces on the lot. So this shows them a little bit more clearly. This is from our application to the MassWorks grant. There's going to be what's called the Sewell Pocket Park on the southern edge, or sorry, on the northern edge of the property along Sewell Street. And then these connecting pedestrian mews, and then another pocket plaza, what's called the Broadway Pocket Plaza along Broadway. So there's the creation of several public civic spaces in addition to the private civic spaces that will be used by the residents of the buildings. So just to give a sense of the plan that we have discussed for using this MassWorks infrastructure grant, what we have discussed with the state is using these funds for an acquisition of a portion of the civic spaces, likely the portion that will become the Sewell Pocket Park. We have a bit of a timing issue with the spending of this grant since it needs to be spent prior to the development of the space. This space is going to be the last part that's developed of this overall project. So likely looking at a 2027, sometime in 2027 timeline, assuming all things move forward as planned. So in order to make this work, we are looking to have the redevelopment authority purchase the lot up front using the MassWorks funding, and then hold the land while the development team finishes the work. And then ultimately the goal will be to have the redevelopment authority deed that land over to the city to hold in perpetuity as a park. So what this allows us to do is to achieve the highest level of public control over the space moving forward, which obviously that is generally the goal of cities, is to hold these civic spaces. It simplifies things like improvements to the land, redesigns to the park space, things like that. I'll note also though that all of these civic spaces, even if publicly owned, will be maintained by the development team or the project managers of these buildings moving forward. That's a condition of the development from the ZBA. So I'm going to stop sharing just to give a sense of where we are in this overall process. So we are currently working with an appraiser to get a sense of the value of this site. And then we are also drafting a land development agreement for the SRA to ideally enter into with the development team at 299 Broadway, which would allow the development team to finish the improvements to the park while the SRA owns the site, as well as ensure that those improvements are done to the standards of the redevelopment authority and the ZBA approval. This is something that we were looking to do anyways, because the LDA also will outline a process for the certificates of compliance, which, similar to what was done earlier this year or late last year with US2, this essentially allows the SRA to issue a certificate that says, the development that has come forward is in line with the goals of the urban renewal plan, and it can help with the refinancing of any project within an urban renewal area once development is complete. So I'm going to be coming back with additional updates in the coming months. Mostly wanted to preview this for SRA members, see if you have any initial questions that we can make sure that we address in the coming months as we come back with more details.
Ben, go ahead, Christine.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and maybe, Ben, it would be helpful to put the site plan back up. Could you just maybe go through a couple things again? I know you're trying to go get us off the call. Maybe you're concerned about our time here this evening, but you went pretty quickly there.
Okay.
If you could just clarify what land are you seeking the SRA to or what portion of that open space will the SRA in your plan be acquiring? Is it the whole thing or just the part in the back?
Just the part in the back. So let me reshare my screen quickly.
And who are we purchasing it from? I guess, is this being purchased from the 299 Broadway development team or from a third party? And then I guess third, why does the SRA have to get involved with this? Why can't it just be the city?
So can you see the plan again?
Yeah. I mean, this is, this one's this one's great.
Yeah, so the goal is to have the redevelopment authority purchase just the Sewell Pocket Park lot. The reason that this can't be done, like that we're looking to do this through the redevelopment authority rather than not just having the city purchase the land, is so the timing of the grant spending needing to happen before. Sorry, let me just look at my note quickly. Yeah, so I described this a little bit, but the timing of when the grant needs to be spent is likely before the finish of the civic space, or it comes closely up against it. That makes it a little bit difficult for the actual planning to spend this grant within the timeline on a finished civic space. So that raised the need for needing to hold the land while the development team finishes the improvements to the space. It gets a lot more complicated for the city to do that. Just because of the procurement requirements around if the city holds land and then somebody is going to be developing on top of it, it immediately gets much more complicated. And so it's simpler in an urban renewal area for the redevelopment authority to hold the land while the improvements to that land are finished. We had talked through, it's definitely a unique situation, but we talked through a lot of scenarios with the state about kind of different ways that we could move forward with this. And this was the way that was ultimately kind of simplest that they were able to get on board with. And your other question that you had asked was around who the purchase would be from. So the acquisition would be from the current owner, which is the development partnership. So this is the partnership between Mark Development, Beacon Communities, and Rise Together.
And so the SRA would buy the land from them. They would redevelop it as a park.
Exactly.
And then the land would be deeded to the city?
Right. So that would ultimately be the goal. So it's a little unique compared to when we think of another space, for instance, the Union Square, like the D2 Plaza. The process there was that the development team developed they developed that land and then deeded it to the city directly without needing kind of the SRA intermediary. But in this case, it's not a requirement of the ZBA approval that the land be deeded to the city. So using the grant funding here allows us to ensure the highest level of public access in perpetuity.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So this is going to be then this Sewell Pocket Park then will be a city-owned parcel stapled to the pedestrian muse and Broadway Pocket Plaza, which will, and what will the ownership of those be?
Yeah, so the ownership of the Muse and the Pocket Plaza will likely remain under the development team. I guess when you say stapled to, I mean, it's obviously like largely separate from the rest of the development. If you've been to the site now, there's a large drop that essentially happens at the southern edge of what will be the Sewell Pocket Park. And this is going to be kind of graded out. That's part of the development process.
Yeah, so I was trying to get there, and that I remember there's a grade change.
Yeah, there's a grade change of about 10 to 15 feet at this kind of dotted line.
Yeah, so will the Pocket Park be separate from, in terms of someone coming into the Broadway Pocket Plaza pedestrian and then walking down the pedestrian muse, will that person be able to then walk into Sewell Pocket Park?
Yeah, so the grade change is going to be leveled out, and so you'll be able to walk directly through from Broadway to Sewell Street.
Okay, that's really my question is, would there then be public access for the public coming from Sewell Street?
Yes, there'll be public access in both directions.
All right, okay.
And could the developer have applied for the grant?
No, from my understanding, so the application to the grant happened before I started with this project. But from my understanding, no, the developer could not have applied directly. This is a grant that's only granted to municipalities.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions of Ben on this?
Yes.
And
Patrick has his.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So, Ben, for the grant funding, the involvement of the SRA, like you said, is to solve this problem of timing and ownership. Do you know, is the source of the funding, it's coming from the state, but is the source of the funding federal flowing through the state? Is it infrastructure money? Is that the source of the restrictions?
When you say source of the restrictions,
Well, it's a timing issue, right?
right?
So I
Um,
mean, if it's ARPA money, that might be why. I was just curious.
I don't believe it's ARPA funding, so this is a state program. I'm not sure when the MassWorks program started with the state, but from my understanding, it's just a state source.
Okay.
They have the 3-year timeline attached to the grant. The exact reason for that being a 3-year timeline, I'm not totally sure. That's just part of the guidelines of the grant.
Okay, thanks.
Courtney?
This might be just because we were reviewing 90 Washington, and this might be top of mind and not applicable, but do we have off-ramps, other options, should the ideal of us giving this to the city not be available, or would we just treat this like the other SRA-owned properties that we work in conjunction with nonprofits or the city to continue to own? I guess I want to just have some type of conversation or contingency should there be any reason why we can't give this to the city in the long term. And maybe that would never happen, but wanted to just ask the question.
Yeah, can I ask if there's any particular situation that you're worried about?
Honestly, not a single one. It's more just like crisis management to
Sure.
just have the conversation about avoiding any type of conflict where we might be in a similar pickle where we have something that like should be in the hands of the city but couldn't because of what you just outlined. So maybe the answer is we can't foresee that right now, and we'll just have to sit tight and hope for the best, and maybe there aren't any consequences. Like we said, we have other SRA owned properties and it's absolutely fine to use, but wanted to just at least ask if there might be any scenarios which that could occur, or more specifically, if there are any consequences should we not be able to give this to the city.
Yeah, I don't foresee that situation just because our goal is to make it clear in the LDA upfront that this is the ultimate purpose. This is something though, I mean, we can try to think through more scenarios in which if there was any reason why the SRA wouldn't be able to deed the land to the city, like what would need to be included in the LDA. If anything would need to be included in that LDA to outline how the SRA manages the site moving forward. We can give some more thought to that. It's not a scenario that I foresee happening, but definitely want to make sure that we're considering all possibilities.
Great, thank you, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Any other questions from members?
I have one more.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think Courtney, kind of drafting off of what you had asked, I mean, again, crisis management, if the SRA is ahead of the development in terms of procuring this land with this grant, the scenario I would want to at least think about is what happens if then the developer does not develop the site on the timeline that they are currently contemplating, and the SRA is then left holding this piece of land in anticipation of a project that has been delayed for whatever reason, but that reason is outside our control. What then?
Yeah. Sorry.
And I guess sort of a part B to that, and that's sort of a, I don't know, Ben, if you can answer that, you know, there's no maybe right answer for that, but I guess as I think about it, I would ask this the grant, the MassWorks grant, you know, what is it contemplated to do? Is it contemplated to procure the land and prove it, or just procure it? Meaning, could the grant, you know, could there be a pocket park here that comes online prior to a development coming online and in front of it?
Well, I guess let me respond to the first note that you brought up first. So this is something that we're actively discussing, is how the LDA would ensure that if we are to purchase the land up front and then for any reason the anticipated improvements that are outlined in the ZBA decision are not made, or not made in the timeliness that the SRA is anticipating, like what the levers will be at that point, to make sure that how to remedy that situation if that is to occur. But that's something that's very actively being discussed and that is generally included in LDA. So we'll make sure that there is something that addresses that when we're able to put that LDA in front of the redevelopment authority to review. In terms of how is MassWorks anticipated to be used, from my understanding, it can be used for acquisition as well as improvements. In this case, the focus is on an acquisition. Given that there are anticipated improvements that will be made to this land, that might be something that factors into the ultimate value that the redevelopment authority decides to pay for this. But that's something that I think we'll need a little bit more clarity about as we get back the appraisal for the lot and things like that.
So things like a put option, right? Could we put the land back to the developer if they don't perform as contemplated in the LDA?
Yeah, I think that we can explore something like that.
Thanks, Christine, for coming up with the scenario, so I seem less paranoid.
No, it's always, you know, if you're ahead of somebody, you know, you want to hold their feet to the fire, right? And
But Ben, you did say, I mean, this is the term of the grant, or the idea behind the grant is acquisition or acquisition. But could you conceivably acquire the site and use it for other purposes besides a public park?
Like, could the city use MassWorks funding to acquire this and use it for different purposes?
Yeah, I mean, you could sell it to a developer and he could develop it for something other than a park. Are there restrictions on the grant?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal is to create public infrastructure. And so in
Okay.
this case, the civic spaces are within that category of public infrastructure. It's also often used for things like road or like sidewalk, those sorts of improvements.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Any other questions, members? Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, seeing none, the next item on the agenda is any items that are not reasonably anticipated by the chair. I have none. Are there anything that anyone wants to offer? No. Seeing none, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, I don't mean to pause. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if we had a public comment period at the end. I did see one member of the public had their hand up.
Sure.
Through
let's-
Mr. Chair, if it's okay to give
Yeah,
them.
no, that's fine. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right,
We
let
can answer
me unmute Chris.
Hi, this is Chris Altera from 48 Morrison Ave in Somerville. This is my first meeting I'm attending with this, so apologies if this is maybe outside the scope of this meeting, but I was curious on the east side of the development plan off of, I believe it's Soul Street, that little spit of land. Is there any plan to develop that or?
Sorry, let me reshare the screen quickly. Which piece were you referring to, Chris?
I'm sorry, the small spit of land off of Grant Street.
So this piece here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that this is meant to be an access drive. I'm not sure of the exact use, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that it, Chris?
Yep, that was all.
Okay.
I do also want to make a quick plug. Obviously, this setting and that question is fully appropriate, Chris. We do also every couple of months we host meetings of it's called the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan Civic Advisory Committee. So it's a group of stakeholders around this project who give regular feedback about its development, as a part of the implementation of the urban renewal plan. So you're always also welcome to come to those meetings. Again, that's the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC, and ask those questions there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that, and thank you, Ben. Any other comments from members? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. Is there a motion? Mr. Gage makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Courtney Brunson seconds. We'll do a roll call vote. Awana Bonnie,
Yes.
Courtney Brunson,
Yes.
Ben Ewan Campen is not with us this evening. William Gage,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Yes.
Christine Stone,
Yes.
and myself, Phil Ercolini, have voted to adjourn. Okay, guys, thank you for your
Bye.
help, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stay warm.
Bye-bye.